Right. So today we're going to talk about writing and publishing papers. I'm going to share the experience that I had so far and how I organize myself to publish papers. I have been a postdoc for 7 years now. This is my first experience as professor, and yes, it's you have to have be very organized and work very hard to publish a lot of papers if you want to be an academic particularly. You need to you you kind of have to like publishing, writing papers, science and all that. So the first step for writing a paper, I'm gonna go through in this lecture these steps. The main step, of course, is the writing part, which I'm gonna focus more time. I'm gonna go through the initial steps for writing a paper, and then in the end, I'm gonna spend the most time talking about these writing submission, resubmission, share, promote, and cite the paper. Uh, so day zero is when you have an idea. Say, oh yeah, this is a interesting idea. I'm going to consider publishing. So, but of course, once you have an idea, this idea could not be the best idea, and then you look at some examples. You see if it exists. If you see if people have done exactly what you were thinking about. You look at the literature, and so this is day zero. I put here that a paper can take 10 months from the time that you have an idea. Let's say this is kind of a minimum time for writing a paper. But of course, this 10 months is not 10 months working on the paper. Working on the paper, like explicitly, can be 1 week to a month, depending on how efficient, how organized you are, and how much time you have to publish the paper. Or it can take around 10 years. For example, I have recently published papers that I started thinking about in 2010, so it took me over 10 years. There are other ones which I have been writing, but very slowly for more than 10 years. So this varies a lot. So all these steps vary a lot. So the idea, how do you have an idea? Uh, Personally, I usually have ideas because I listen to news, I listen to uh, videos, I read articles in the internet, I read academic articles, and while I'm reading it, I stop and think about the technology, think about what's happening, and suddenly I think, oh, this is something interesting that I want to explore. Lately, I have this app installed in my mobile, which is Google Discover, which is very good because it gives you kind of a news feed, but you can choose to like or dislike, and it slowly adapts to your interests and goes very focused on what you are trying to, what you're working on, what you're interested on. It's not really academic focused, but it's more like overall technology. Talks about several things. You can follow people in Twitter. You can follow organization, Twitter technology organization. You can follow channels in YouTube. You can look at YouTube videos. ResearchGate is a tool that gives recommendations for what you might be interested to read. LinkedIn is also very used nowadays a lot to share ideas and share experiences. So several different sources of different topics, themes, ideas that you can have. Working at YASA, I have published public releases. So I publish a paper, and YASA likes the paper, and they decide to release a public release, which is a news feed, which is shared by several internet media. I have published in the last 3 years, maybe 10 um, public releases, and these are the websites which they were published. And these websites, they every day they share several interest ideas which are shared, and people read, people comment. I have received several emails, several invites for projects and stuff. So I'm just sharing here if you like one of these topics, and is a good feed to just continuously read receive news and know what's going on in the world in order to have ideas on matters that are relevant nowadays. So once you have a topic, you have an area, a theme that you might be interested to research on, that you want to publish your idea. You might think how this engineering problem can be solved with the technology, how this technology works, how this technology can be improved, what are the different ways that you can use the technology, how can I compare? Can I compare this technology with this? These are all paper ideas that you can explore, develop, and publish. For example, you can combine, how can I combine two technologies which have not been combined before? What is the future of this technology? Why? So why people are going to use hydrogen, for example. So I'm writing a paper about hydrogen, about how the oil and gas industry is going, why the oil and gas industry will shift to hydrogen. Why are they going to invest so much in hydrogen? Which is the presentation which I gave several times, and I gave a lecture on hydrogen in the oil and gas industry. And these are ideas which could be, for example, scenarios, future scenarios that you think that might happen and that no one thought about, or that no one thought about the way that you did. And there are several unlimited amount of possible ideas that you can turn into an interesting paper that will be accepted for publication, and then will result a lot of citations, and you'll receive high score for your academic performance. The last one is how the implementation of one technology impacts the other. So if I implement this, what's going to happen to the other one, and things like this. Then after you have an idea, you you might have to decide if you're going to put this idea into your publication list or not. So if you are an academic, you should have a publication list. If you are PhD students, you might want to publish more than one paper during your doctoral degree. If you're a master's student, you might only think about one, but maybe you consider two or three because you don't know yet what you're looking at. So it's always good to have a list. I have my own list. These are the papers which I'm expecting to publish in the next 2 or 3 years, which is renewable hydropower plants with series turbines in series, water and energy storage in sedimentary basins, hydrogen transport with airships, electrolysis in ships and applications in Brazil, the benefits of solid state fuel cells for combined ca- carbon capture storage, increasing cooling efficiency in air conditioning systems with swimming pools, vehicles with solid oxide fuel cells. So a list, several papers. I have more than this. They don't fit in the slide. It's very important to have a list. If any one of you read this list and find something interested that you want to publish together, work together with me, I'll be very happy because it's always good to have a network of people publishing together and sharing the effort for publishing and developing and sharing research. So I'm leaving it here for you to let me know if you're interested in these topics. Then you need to diversify your research themes. So another topic for planning or your academic career, you need to not only have one research team. Usually, and why is this? Why would you have more than one research team? Because this works for me particularly. I cannot think more than an hour or two on a single subject because it just melts my mind. I'm just get bored. After a day working on a paper, I might want to have 3 or 4 days doing something else, working on other subjects, because it's too much to be thinking about one topic. Maybe if you try to focus so much on a topic, you might not realize that there are different aspects of this topic that you haven't considered. So if you go back after 2 or 3 days not working in a topic, you might have you realize things that you didn't realize. So you see, yeah, I didn't think about this. Oh, this is interesting, and then you reanalyze your research with a different hat. So this is always good to have several research topics. For example, I work with pump storage, hydropower, seawater air conditioning, seasonal storage, long-term energy planning, airships, balloons, energy crops, geoengineering, climate change, water energy land nexus, Brazil energy matrix, decision support systems, water management, biofuels, hydrogen. These are the ones that I could remember, but there might be some other ones which I have been working. So it's very good if you want to go for research academia to have a list of things, different lists of things. It's also good to have an idea on the people looking at these topics. So once you have an idea, I want to work in this topic. You want to know if this topic is a trend topic, if interest is increasing, if interest is reducing, if people are thinking about this. A good tool in order to check this is Trends from Google. Gives a good perspective of how many people are searching for these terms. So comparing, for example, renewable energies, natural gas, coal, and nuclear, you have that nuclear is the most searched, then coal, then natural gas, then renewable energy, just to have an overall idea. Because your paper, apart from being published, it has to be cited several times. So it's very good to know if people are going to cite it. So if you are, for example, publishing papers on solar energy has very high interest for people. A lot of people publishing papers on solar energy. Wind power goes after the interest is reducing a little bit in the last years. You have hydropower maintained a reasonable constant interest, and energy storage has increased uh, 30 to 40% in the last 4 years. So it's interesting to have a look. For example, if you want to write a paper uh, on a particular region of Brazil, you can limit your research for a particular region. And people, for example, this is renewable energies. So compared these four research topics, Piauí is the state that looks more for energy, solar energy. So if you want to publish a paper on the potential of solar energy in Piauí, the chances that you will have that you'll be cited several times is relatively high. Sorry, this is renewable energy. Solar energy, also solar energy is Piauí, Tocantins, and Mato Grosso. So it's very interesting tool. Uh, For example, I looked for smart grids, energy storage. So I wanted to compare. For some reason, smart grids is lowering significantly the amount of interest in smart grids. So if you write a paper today on smart grids, it might not be picked up by citation as much. So you might think, oh, is it really worth going into this paper? Is it really worth like trying to spending, let's say, 1 week to a month in a paper that people are not going to be interested? This graph compares pump storage, grid batteries, and compressed air. just to have a comparison. Compressed air is also lowering a little bit the interest. Grid battery is increasing. Pump storage remains similar, reducing a little bit of interest. You have battery EVs compared with hydrogen EVs. You have the battery EVs is rising significantly in the last 4 years, mainly because of Tesla and all the investments in battery EVs that's happening nowadays. Hydrogen EVs, not so much. Maybe comparing different uh, fuel cells, you have proton exchange membrane is the one that's most looked at, and you have solid oxide fuel cells is the one most researched. Then proton exchange membranes. Then the alkaline fuel cells. Then you can also look by region, which countries are looking at um, fuel cell technologies. If you want to do a regional study focusing on a particular part of the world, looking at batteries, different batteries, you have solid state battery receiving a lot of Google research. Lithium ion batteries is rising, the number of researches, and then you have different other energy battery storage technologies, metal, air battery, redox flow battery, liquid metal battery. In Brazil, for example, lithium ion battery is the one mostly researched. Uh, Now I'm gonna pass the speech to Conrado because Conrado wrote a paper, very interesting paper on energy storage, and he'll have a lot of things to share with us. I'm gonna mute my. So now we're gonna talk about energy
Oh,
storage trends.
okay, Julian, thanks. Uh, Hi, everybody. Julian asked me to tell you just a little bit about this paper we are working on. So, the main idea of this paper is to map this wide research area. So, we look here to energy storage together with renewable energy. So, we want to map this research area. And for those who participate last October on in the research methodology course we did last year, we used some of the tools we we presented there. So this first image is we can look right through. It's energy storage papers together, energy storage and renewable energy renewables. Uh, the number of publications per year. So we can look here. This is the result from Scopus database only. We didn't use the Web of Science database. So here we can look. We have expressively increase in number of publications since 2000, year 2000. There's a lot of reasons for that. So internet, computer popularization is examples of it. But of course, we can link this result to the interest in energy storage, the subject energy storage. So just to be clear, in this paper, we performed a methodology to filter the results. So we started with about 5,000 papers, and we arrived at 1,626 papers. So this is the set of works we assessed in this paper. Please pass the slide. Thanks, Julia. This is another evaluation we did here, the number of publications per country. And this is straightforward also. We have United States as the country who has the higher number of publications, and followed by China. Uh, it is interesting here that United States and China together represent about 27% of the works published in this set of works I said before. So we have another or other expressive countries like United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, but we have to remember we are talking about energy storage as a whole. We have specific research groups. For example, in Spain, we have researchers focused on thermal energy storage and so on. But here we are talking about energy storage as a whole. And it's important for us that Brazil is not here, of course. We have a few number of papers published in this area. So this is very important for us. The next slide, please. Okay. The slides before related to symptometric analysis. Here we performed a bibliometric analysis. Some of you already use this tool, of course. We can extract the basic information we can extract from this graph is the where these papers were published, right? In which journals. So we have the number of papers published in each journal and also the average publication year. I believe this is important to map before you want to start your paper to know where to aim the journal you want to publicate your paper. Sorry.
Sorry, Conrado. I just have a question. What does the strings connecting the different journals mean? Do you know?
Okay, of course. This is a journal citation map. So the link between the journals represents the citation between them, and you can see that the width of these lines is different from one to another. So it represents how many citations one journal is referring to the other.
The renewable and sustainable energy reviews, it didn't show up in the research.
Probably it does. I noticed that this is not the most recent version of our paper. I believe there are some better images than this one, but I believe it does. But I'm not finding it here. Probably because the number of published papers in this journal is much lower than in this one, presented in this image. Okay, thanks. Another assessment we can do is looking for the keywords used in all these papers. And here it's important to understand that we are looking to the keywords indexed by journals and also by the authors themselves. So there are two main evaluations you can perform here. The first one is look to before we have this image produced with VozViewer software. So the software already performed this clustering between these keywords. So the circle size represents the number of frequency of this keyword in the study, and the links presents the connection between the words, the keywords, right? In this study, we found four main clusters that we name here in green: wind power. So every keywords related to wind power, gas, economics, and market. We have the blue cluster, which would represent thermal storage, solar energy. The red one is related to microgrid, smart grid, and batteries. And the yellow is flywheel, hydrogen, and fuel cells. You can have some paper using keywords in different clusters, of course, but this image relates to the frequency of the when they appear together.
Yeah. So just ask a question. So for example, if I want to publish a paper and I put these keywords, well, of course they have to be relevant in the paper that I'm writing. But if I put these keywords, the chances that people will find the paper and cite will increase, right? If I put
Yes, that will be a point of view. Other usage for this graphic is to find similar keywords when you're starting your research. Let's say I want to study fuel storage. Okay, so which other keywords could I use? And if I don't have a clue of it, I could see this graph and see other keywords such as hydrogen storage, flywheels, and so on. But what you said, it's totally right. Okay.
just going back to this slide. So if, for example, if I want to get my paper cited several times in energy storage, I might probably have to publish a paper in these journals that are cited by other journals, right?
Yeah, that's right. Now we know that, of course, energy storage it's a very wide area. So if you are publishing about, let's say, pumped hydro, you would search. You would have to search for. Sorry, you would have to search for more specific journals to aim for the better journal.
Mhm.
But this is the logic. The logic is right.
Okay.
Okay. Other assessment that we can perform with the keywords is the more used keywords a long time, right? So we can look for this graph. For example, we have average occurrence years. In 2013, we have a majority of keywords like flywheels, fuel cells, hydrogen, and more recent papers deal with alternative energy, digital store, stochastic systems, and so on. This can indicate the tendency, the trend of the keywords, and also maybe the interest of that research area, the focus of this research area a long time.
Okay,
Right?
this is very interesting methodology. Do you what's the name of the software that you use? Is there
Okay,
a
this
website?
no. This is a software very easy to use. This is VOS Viewer. Most of the students here already use it, but I can show you later. It's very
Okay.
easy to use, and it's a free software, of course.
Hmm.
That there are several tools to perform this kind of
Yeah.
evaluation.
I see it very useful if when you are thinking of a paper, if you want to publish or not, and to see if maybe I lost the time, oh, I should have published this paper 5 years ago, for example, flying wheels. If I write a paper about flying wheels, given that the peak happened in 2013, no one's gonna cite it. No one is like I'm wasting my time because people already wrote about this. No one's writing about this anymore.
Yes, that's very interesting for this kind of evaluation. You
Hmm.
can understand uh, which are the most recent keywords and
Hot
focus on
topic.
that first topic. Yes. Uh, well, there are other evaluations we did here. We we by looking to the most frequent keywords in the set of papers, we categorize them into the applications. So we have here energy storage applied to wind power, which represents about almost 29% of the papers. And we also have solar energy with 27% of the papers using these both keywords, energy storage and solar energy, right? And we also look to microgrid and smart grid. Okay, there are smaller role in this graphic, but they were also important. So this is the four uh, most used keywords in our search, and the share of other applications relates to the papers that didn't look for any of these four applications. So all of the other roles applications were very much smaller than this four. Okay. And finally, we looked to the technologies of energy storage, and this was very interesting to map. We found that battery represents the most interesting subject topic in this among these papers we found, and followed by TESS, which is more close to our area here in mechanical engineering, and it's very important, very representative. And we also found compressed air with 9.7, hydrogen, flywheel, yes, and again, the share of other technologies still represent 20%, but uh, alone, none of these technologies, including in the others, uh, get near to wave energy, for example, which is the smaller part of it. So I believe this is basically what we have to say about the paper until now. This is not already published, but we hope that it will be very soon.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Conrado.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. So then, after you add the paper to the publishing list, you might work in one paper one day, one paper another day, and then continue developing it. It's advisable to create, for example, a Word document where you start structuring the paper and writing the paper and putting all the citations, references, information that you find in these 10 years that is relevant and you think that might be added to the paper. Um, I take 10 years to publish a paper because I usually have very innovative ideas which probably no one ever thought about. So I can have 10 years to publish my paper because if I don't publish, no one's ever going to publish. The chances that somebody publishes is very small. So if you have very, very innovative ideas, you can have more time. But as I said, for example, if you want to be quickly and you know that everyone's talking about a certain subject and your strategy is to start writing a paper and publish, you have to publish as fast as you can because then you get this flow of people, of several people publishing at the same time. But maybe you try to focus to publish in 1 month, 2 months, and to get rolling, to put the citations and get a lot of citations. Excel is important. Maybe Excel, maybe Python, maybe a programming language if you want to do a model, but at least some equations, some estimates, order of magnitude to see if what you're looking at makes sense or not. You need to have at least basic calculations in the first stages of the paper, and also images. Images are very important for to express your ideas. If you have very nice images in your paper, the chances that it's going to be cited is very high. The chances that people will read and share is also high. So I usually make 90% of my images in PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint to create my images. You can use Photoshop, you can use several other tools. I personally use PowerPoint. So this is kind of a repository where you dump all the information related to this particular article, which you added to your publication list. And while you're searching for references is very important. You can have a look at different research engines. Wikipedia has an analysis of different research engines by number of users. So, for example, Google Scholar is the most research engine used around the world. Is free, is run by Google. Other important ones that we use as engineers is Web of Science. Some people use Mendeley. I use Mendeley for the citations, but it also has a research tool. It also recommends paper to me every 2 weeks. Scopus. There is also Science Direct, which is not in this list, part of Scopus. So, but Scopus is you have to pay. There is a subscription, which uh, most universities have subscriptions, so people have access. I usually tend to use Scopus because most of the A1 papers, the Qualiscapes A1 papers, are Elsevier papers, and they are managed by Scopus, and the Scopus has several resources for analyzing their own papers, which is Elsevier and other colleagues that they have. So this is a video which is not so important, so I'm not gonna make you guys watch it now, but it's relevant to know. For example, if you use Google Scholar, if you have several papers that most of them doesn't make sense, there are several tools, or for example, or and if statements, interrogation marks, you have the till, you have several keywords that you can use in order to personalize your search, which, for example, Scopus doesn't have. Nowadays, we struggle with too much information, and the problem is finding exactly what you want. So having a research engine and knowing how the research engine works helps you a lot. I'm gonna leave this here because it's 10 minutes. It's quite long. If you want to watch, it's very interesting. Yeah, I watched it. I learned a lot of different skills for Google Scholar, Google Scholar research. Then the next step, after you get some citations, you learn more about your topic, you finally find that it's worth sharing what you found, and you already have some knowledge on the topic. The idea is already well established, and the first step for publication usually that I use is to, for example, join a conference or ask to present some ideas. Uh, have, for example, well, nowadays I have this lecture position, professor position, so I am giving lecture on topics which I think are interesting to further develop. So any experience, any opportunity that you have, maybe, for example, the lab from Professor Snyder. Every Friday, he had gave the opportunity for people to present their work, their ideas, and having this opportunity is good because writing a paper from scratch can be very can require a lot of energy. So it's good to have steps to reach the publication. So one interesting step is to present a presentation conference. And for example, if you present and you record your presentation, as I have been doing, what you can do, you can load your presentation in YouTube. You don't need to share it. You can keep it private to yourself. And then if you click in this button here, these three dots here, it will give you the opportunity to open the transcription. So what YouTube is going to do is going to translate your lecture. So, for example, you don't even need to write down the information that you're teaching. You just copy and paste in your paper. It saves you some time. Another benefit of giving presentations is that, for example, you can focus on nice images that you use in your paper. For example, I have a paper which I have submitted to several journals: Nature Sustainability, Nature Energy. Nowadays, I have been focusing on nature journals because they have high impact factor. But then I realized that no nature journals wants to build a waterway connecting the Paraná River, the Rio da Plata, with the Madeira River, with Rio Negro, and then Orinoco River. So I made a, I wrote a paper about a new waterway that crosses South America, which is substantially larger than the Mississippi River water basin, and the heights are not very very high. You just have to, for example, build some ecluses in Geral Dam, in Santo Antonio Dam, in the binational dam between Bolivia and Brazil. Of course, you need to create some locks in order to pass this section of the river. Funny that the Negro River and the Orinoco River is probably the only location in the world that the Orinoco River divides in two basins. It's one river that flows into two river basins. So when you are in the wet period, the river level is high. You have this braço, which is the name of this geological formation, which allows people to navigate from Orinoco River to the Amazon River during the wet period because there is a natural connection between the two basins. And this makes this area here, which is covered by the Orinoco River and the Negro River and the Amazon River, into an island. So we have a natural island in the middle of South America. Just sharing some interesting aspect of our geology. This island just happens in during the wet period when this braço appears. And if you want to cross from this section into another part of South America, you have to cross a river. Uh, Other pictures of this paper, particularly, you have to try. You should, if you want to publish in a high impact paper, make as nice pictures as you can. This is the topography of the Amazon basin, and I'm proposing a reservoir. Yeah, it's not a very good idea, not good paper for a nature paper because nature just wants to keep the Amazon as God created it and leave it there. So I just wasted some time trying to publish in Nature. I'll start submitting to other journals. This type of images, nice images, paper. In the end of the paper, I suggest that the connection between the waterway and the middle of the Amazon should be done with airships because the Amazon region have very small velocity winds, and roads in the Amazon cause a lot of is one of the main causes of deforestation. If you don't have roads, if you use airships to carry the materials from the forest, there's extraction, natural extraction. Without deforestation, then you can reduce the impact on the forest. So, yeah, I just presented an idea, and given that I'm presenting an idea, I can, for example, train, practice, learn. People ask questions, you develop your idea, and then you can take all these experiences. I can, can turn my voice into text and paste into the paper, and then I start writing the paper. So when you start a paper, it's, I usually use Word. Many people use LaTeX. LaTeX. I use Word because it's just easier for me. I didn't actually spend time for learning LaTeX, and I think it's easier to edit and it This takes less time to go through and reproduce a paper and use this structure. But some journals, for example, if you send latex, they will have a feeling that you are a robust and experienced researcher that is taking all the care and is meticulous in the work, detailed, taking into account. So they are not going to they will assume that you're a good researcher. So if you do use latex, it's good. It gives you a very good image for the reviewers, for the editors, and for the publisher of the journal. So when you want to structure your paper, I firstly start with the introduction, the methods, then I go for results, discussion, conclusion, and then I write the abstract and I decide which is the final title I'm going to use. Um, so in the introduction, what you need to think about is that you have an idea, you have to think what this idea, what this topic, what this research is about. What's the need for this research? What am I trying to share here? What this idea relates to? What's impacted? And every subject that you address, you have to add citations. You need to show the literature that exists on the topic. You need to show that you have substantial knowledge on the area. So most of the citations, most of the background, the needs behind is in the introduction, and you also have to explain what's your paper about. Then in the methods, you need to show images, equations. You need to show how are you going to prove that your idea, your thesis is reliable, is a good idea, and then that's developed in the method. After you you want to present the results that you have, so to show that you are right or that you're wrong, and show that your methodology works, how, and try to explain, analyze the results in the results section. Then after, you could add a discussion or not, which you link different aspects that might impact your methodology, which you did not cover, which were not included for some reason. You might have to explain why, because maybe the reviewer might ask you to add this to the methodology. So if you explain why you didn't, it will save you time. It might be that the reviewer will accept your work, and in the conclusion, just conclude paper, and you discuss what are the impacts, why it's so important, and show the main points that you found out in your paper. References, very important aspect. I'm going to go through more detail in the end of the lecture, but you should focus on 70 to 100, 150 citations. The more citations, the better. You have more people looking at your paper. If you cite somebody, they might be interested to read your paper, and that will result in them maybe citing you in the future. So try to add as many citations as possible. Yeah. So the reason why I decided to give this lecture about writing papers is because Conrado particularly mentioned that it was very good that I shared this methodology for writing academic papers. So when you are writing a paper in English, when you're writing not only an academic paper, when you're writing an article, when you're writing an essay, when you're writing anything in English which is not casual, which is formal, you have to follow this structure. If you don't follow this structure, people will will think that you are not that you don't know this methodology. People think that you don't write academic papers very well. They will complain about your English. They might not be particularly they might not even know what is the problem because English people, when they read, that's what they used to. So they might not be able to explain why you don't write well, but they follow this structure. And if you don't follow this structure, they will find your text very difficult to follow, very difficult to read. So this is the structure. I talked to you about the structure of a paper overall. Now I will talk to you about the structure of paragraphs. So a paragraph is divided in several sections. The main example is this in the slide, which is the first sentence of your paragraph should talk about the topic sentence. So, for example, introduce the topic that you will develop in the end of your paragraph. I'll give several examples as follow. Then you have the development. So you introduce a topic, and then you have to develop the topic, to talk, to give more arguments about this point. You need to further detail, give subtopics about the main topic. It depends on what you're talking about, what you're trying to particularly say. Of course, it depends a lot, but this has to be related to the topic sentence. And then after you develop your idea, you give examples in order to for people to better understand what you're talking about. And people like probably when people are reading, they're already thinking about examples. But if you clearly show some examples, they will then be 100% sure of what you're trying to talk about. Because when you're writing an academic paper, the person has to understand exactly what you're talking about. It's not that you're writing fancy words just to say that you know how to write fancy words. Everything has to make sense. It has to be well positioned, and people need to understand. So after, in the end, after you introduce a topic, you develop the topic, you give some examples, you have to summarize. So in order to conclude your paragraph, you need to say, so this happens, or you say, as you see, this is a common theme, common thread because of this and that. So you have to give your personal view on the topic. So you introduce the topic, then you have to say something to conclude how this topic is related to the final idea, how this contributed to your research or something. You have to summarize. This is not the previous slide is not the only structure for a paragraph. There are other ones you can maybe develop, give examples, develop again, give examples again, and then summarize. You can give a topic. So the first paragraph is always a topic you can develop, and then you can give counter arguments just to show that this is not the only uh, accepted view of this idea. Then you develop again your arguments in order to show, no, they say this is wrong, but I'm telling you this is right. Give examples and then summarize. So it's an argument. You're developing an argument. Of course, the reader is not going to be able to tell you that your argument is not good, but you have to be as good. You have to try as best as possible to make your arguments acceptable for others. And this, in the structure of your paragraph, helps a lot in order for you to develop your argument. So another example is the topic sentence explanation. You give evidences. So evidences are citations. So you give citations to your explanation. Within the explanation, you can, for example, give some references for the particular topic that you're talking about. Then you give evidence. You can comment, argue. So this is the main part topic. And why this topic sentence is so important, because sometimes the the reader is not interested in your paper, the whole of your paper. It's not interested in reading all the paper. Maybe he just wants to read some particular aspect of your paper, which is usually addressed in a paper talking about energy storage. So, for example, uh, when you are building a pump storage site, you need to flood an area and you have impacts, environmental impacts, and they want to know what you think about the environmental impact. Then he will read all the first sentence of your article, and then in the sentence that they say, yeah, pump storage has some drawbacks, and and then he wants to read about the drawbacks. Then he will read this paragraph. Pump storage is not all good. There are problems with pump storage. So this paragraph he's interested. He's going to read what are the problems with pump storage. Because the topic sentence told you that this paragraph is going to be talking about the problems of pump storage, for example. And then you tell about the problems with pump storage. It floods a huge area. It needs the right topography, and then you give examples of pump storage projects which had a lot of issues with environmental impacts. Then you comment, yes, pump storage impacts are not acceptable, which makes pump storage not a good alternative. So you give your own comment, and then you conclude. So in this research, we assume that uh, pump storage will not be added in the Brazilian energy matrix, for example. So you raise the point and then you conclude. So regarding the problems of pump storage are so bad, the problems that we are not going to consider. This is all developed in one paragraph. So one tip, very important tip, is that, for example, if you talk about the problems of pump storage, you should create only one paragraph talking about this topic, one idea, and you're not going to address this problem in another paragraph. Of course, if you're writing a whole paper about pump storage problems, you might have to talk about energy pump storage problems in several papers, in several paragraphs. But if you are talking about the several topics of pump storage, maybe 10, should be you should focus on putting all the information very well organized and structured in one paragraph and develop it. You can reference to images, you can reference to tables, you can talk about what's in the table, why the table is important, but try to focus one idea in one paragraph. So this is an example of paragraph structure. Uh, so corporate social responsibility can generate a positive reputation for a company, leading to positive, possibly more sales and growth. So you're writing a paper and stuff, and you're introducing the fact that if a company invests in sustainable energy, for example, they will grow more than if they didn't. So you make a statement. So now, if you wanna learn about corporate social responsibility, you will read this paper, this paragraph. Sorry. According to Jones, so then you develop the idea. According to Jones, you can cite a corporation that invests in the environment and ethical approaches of CR, CSR will demonstrate that the public and the media that they are responsible company. Watson, 2018, provides evidence that this improves consumer sales and customers' trends to support ethical green business practice, thus improving profitability and encouraging growth. So they gave some fundament, some arguments which have already been published, which have been peer reviewed, which people have generally accept. The science literature accept this, as a valid argument. So you develop your idea, then you give examples. For example, a yogurt company called Yeo Valley has been investing in making its product organic, creating fully recyclable packaging, and reducing CO2 outputs. As a result, profits had doubled within the last 2 years, providing the company with a range of opportunity to expand. Peterson, 2019. I'll give an example in order to for people to better understand what you're talking about. Overall, the evidence seems to suggest that investing in corporate social responsibility can improve brand image and productivity. So then you conclude, you reinforce your argument as you are arguing that your thesis, that your paper makes sense. So you use all your the 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 words that you have in order to give subsidies, to give more reasons why people would invest in corporate social responsibility. So the keywords, it's important in order to create keywords that link into the topic centers. For example, corporate social responsibility connects with environmental, ethnical approaches, ethnical green business practice, recyclable packaging, reducing CO2 outputs. So the text that you are writing here has to be related to the topic center. A positive reputation, the public and the media, uh, responsible company, brand image. So you should never write a topic sentence and start talking about writing about something else in the middle of the paragraph. Growth, you have several growth kind of synonyms. More sales, you also repeat more sales. So this doesn't need to be you don't need to look explicitly at your whole paragraph to see if every sentence is connected to the topic sentence, but you have to know that the paragraph all should refer to this topic sentence. If you want, for example, cite other work from academics according to Watson provides evidence. So you'll this is important in order to give more credibility to your arguments and to add more references so that you get more citations in your paper and cohesive devices in order to link different ideas and different aspects in your text leading to that they this thus, for example, as a result, providing overall. These are important words in order to guide the reader and connect different sentences. Another very important aspect in academic papers is that you have to give your own opinion. For example, green shows caution. So, for example, you can, so corporate social responsibility generates, if you don't put can and you write corporate social responsibility generates a positive reputation for a company. It can be that sometime one day one company focus on corporate social responsibility and for some reason the sales went down and no one bought anything, and you can't say that it can because there are examples of companies that did this and did not increase the sale growth. So for example, if you write a sentence in English that somebody can argue and say, oh, this is wrong, I have an example here that somebody did this and it did not give the results that you're saying. Then what happens that, for example, a reviewer cannot accept your paper, You can fail your PhD thesis if your examiner is an asshole. For example, you have to make sure that every sentence that you say you can defend. You know that this sentence is right. So given that not every case corporate social responsibility increases growth sales, you have to put a can, you have to might, may, you have to give these indications that it's not every case. Sometimes it happens often, and you have to put this tend to support, can improve a brand image, and stance is where you stand. So so this green is this green caution is just to be caution. You're not gonna say that this works every time, because it's very difficult to find one solution, one aspect which always works like this. So you have to be caution, and you have to add these type of caution indicators. And then this stance is where you stand. For example, if I believe that this is a good idea, or if I believe that this is not a good idea. So everyone has their own opinion. The, so corporate social responsibility will demonstrate to the public and the media that, for example, they could say they will not demonstrate. It's showing your position, your idea about the subject. Improving profitability seems to suggest, so he's saying that this suggests that will increase. Maybe if he thinks that it didn't increase, he would say the evidence does not suggest that's increasing. So it's an opinion. You have to give your own opinion in a paper because it's your paper, and you have to show your way of observing the world. So the main topic, so the main part of when writing a paper is the topic sentence. And when you want to write a paper, what you what I usually do is that I want to address an issue. I want to write about swimming pool thermal energy storage, and I have nothing in my paper. So what I do, I think about the topic sentence that I'm going to write in order to structure the paper, and to make sure that the order of the topic makes sense, so that the reader will understand what I'm trying to say, to guide the reader through the paper to learn about swimming pool thermal energy storage. So these are examples of topic sentence. So these are the first sentence of the papers that I wrote using this methodology. For example, in the abstract, I write, the rise in distributed renewable energy generation creates a growing need to find viable solutions for energy storage to match energy demands and supply at all times. So the first paragraph says that energy storage is important, and I'm going to address energy storage in the abstract. I don't go directly in the solution. I don't go directly in in the development. I talk about the need first in an abstract. And then in the introduction, I say the International Energy Agency baseline scenario estimates that cooling electricity consumption will increase from 2,000 terawatt hour to this. So I'm saying that energy consumption is increasing. So then I developed saying that most air conditioning, most refrigerant systems are run with air conditioning. The growth is happening mostly in these countries. This rise is happening because of this and that. So this is the main topic. Energy refrigeration is increasing. Then the next topic I talk about swimming pools. Swimming pools are common household components in high income houses. I introduced the swimming pools. I talk a lot about swimming pools. A recent study, and then I start addressing the literature. So people read a recent study, they say, okay, it's going to show the literature on swimming pools. Private swimming pools are characterized by relatively low usage rates. So here I start to develop the solution. So I say that people don't use swimming pools, and then I propose a use for a swimming pool, which is thermal energy storage. And then I introduce this technology was named swimming pool thermal energy storage. And then if somebody wants to learn about swimming pool thermal energy storage, they will read this paragraph. So if you read this, you know exactly which paragraph is talking about which topic. So this paper is divided into to 5 sections. So this paragraph is going to guide the author to show what each section is going to address in the paper. So I'm gonna add the topic sentences for my papers that have been published. The 5 last ones. I don't need to go through all of them. So the main part of the paragraph is a topic sentence. When you are structuring your paper, you don't need to write the whole paragraph in order to structure the paper. When you're structuring the paper, you might need just 5 to 6 words. For example, the first word of the introduction is this: whilst a number of energy storage technologies are being developed to manage electricity grids, most technologies only fulfill short term cycles. So I'm talking about energy storage, and I'm addressing the current uh, state of energy storage. Saying here that everyone just looks into short-term energy storage. So I'm going to talk about batteries. I'm going to talk about several solutions for short-term term cycles, and then I'm going to say why seasonal storage is so important. Why do I do this? Because if I start talking about seasonal pump storage, people will say, "Well, why is this guy talking about seasonal storage? Everyone talks about daily storage." I have to give them some explanation. So the literature. I am one of the few. Like I don't know anyone else that's writing about seasonal pump storage in the literature. Just I write about this. So if I start talking about seasonal storage, people think that I'm crazy. So I have to guide them to swallow the arguments that I'm going to give in the paper. Then I introduce seasonal storage, and then I start talking about seasonal pump storage in the following paragraph, and then it continues. This paper about cooling down the Earth, geoengineering, it's um, it's another paper that I published, and I put all the topic sentences here. I added this here because geoengineering is a very contradictory subject. Not many people like it, and most people agree that it's not the best solution to cool down the Earth, to mitigate climate change. So when I write, for example, about this topic, I need to be sensible that the reader, 90% of the reader, don't think that geoengineering is the solution for climate change. So when I write the topic sentence, which is the most important sentence in the whole paragraph, I introduce the solution like this: reducing CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is the most important solution to climate change. And then I start developing the paragraph. However, the mitigations, alternatives, however, current research shows that with the rate of reduction of CO2, the world will still warm up to 2 degrees, and we still need another solution. And this solution is geoengineering. And then I talk about geoengineering in this paragraph, but I don't start with the topic sentence literally with intentionally, because I know that people will feel happy that I start the topic. So I talk about the main important subject is reduce CO2 emissions, but it's not enough. So I have to do this. It's just to make the reader happier that I'm not planning to just, geoengineer the whole world and not think about reducing CO2 emissions. So this paper about airships, balloons, similar topic sentence. This one's about reducing sea levels with submerged barriers, dams in Greenland. I do the same. I use the same strategy, which is to talk about the main solution for global warming is to reduce CO2 emissions. However, with current reduction in CO2 emissions, we won't be able to stop global warming, so we have to find adaptive measures. And then I introduce the solution. And then uh, the following paragraphs, topics, I talk about recent work that has been going on in the subject. So yeah, have so this writing the paper like this shows the reader that I know how to structure uh, a paragraph, and I know, and I'm sensible enough not to give the most focus to geoengineering. I'm giving the most focus to CO2. This is why people accept the paper, because if I, for example, start writing about creating a waterway in the Amazon and I have nothing else to write about in order to make it sound less impactful, then people just don't accept the paper because they think I'm completely nuthead. Yeah, so this is another example for you to see. So topic topic sentences, very important. They guide the reader. And yes, so I went through the strategies to write paragraphs, which is very important. Now I'm going to go through other aspects which are also important. Several times when I collaborate with researchers, particularly from Brazil, um, I have the experience to I have the experience that the Brazilian, I mean, it's not all writers, all Brazilian writers, but let's say 30% of the Brazilian writers, they expect that I read his mind. They expect that I think something that is not written in the text, but is implied in the text. The problem with writing like this, let's say not objective, so subjectively, does not work in academic writing. Why? Mainly because there are so many people from different countries that are going to read your paper. For example, Russians, Egyptians, English people, Chinese, Bolivians, Nigerians, even people from different states in Rio, people from different universities that doesn't have the same. They're not used to the same. That doesn't know what the writer knows. Sometimes just the writer knows something. So you have to be very objective, clear, not never subjective. You have to always never assume that the reader will understand what you're writing. You have to be as clear as possible. Uh, if it's not explicitly mentioned in its text what you want to say, the reader will not understand. So this is what you have to assume, because maybe your professor will understand, maybe the person on your bunker from your doctorado will understand, but if you publish it, a lot of people might not understand because they don't have the knowledge that you have, they don't have the culture that you have also, very different cultures. So after writing a sentence, think about the possible ways that the sentence could be interpreted. If it's not objective and transparent, or there is ambiguity. So if you're reading something and it could be understood differently at different two different ways, which doesn't one of them doesn't say what you want to say. So you have to rewrite and remove the ambiguity because ambiguity in academic papers is not accepted also. So then you rewrite it. Just make sure you're very objective and transparent. After you write the whole paper, you should grammar check, and the best option for grammar check is to use tools, internet tools that do it for you for free. Um, I use Ginger. Some people use Grammarly. I don't pay for the subscription, so it takes more time. It's a little bit more difficult. You have to delete the text and wait for it to correct. It just takes some more time, but I'm not going to pay for the service. But it's very good to have, for example, one of these tools in order to grammar check your text. Another tool that I use always, even to read your assignments. I don't read your assignments. I put Google to read it for me. I read very slowly. I guess you saw me reading my own text. I have very bad reading skills. And I use this tool, which is called Read Out Loud. What I do, I take your text that you send me with your research proposals, I copy and paste, I paste into my email, my Google Mail, I send to me. Once it is in my Google Mail, the text, I select all the text and I press this button, and the computer reads your research proposal to me. And when I listen to your research proposal, I I'm much more able to pick some grammar errors, uh, intellectual, no, not intellectual, structural errors, misconceptions, errors. So things to improve. When I particularly write a paper, I particularly don't write well at all. But if I listen to what I write, I am shocked usually because it's terrible. It's extremely horrible. I write really badly. But when I listen to what I write, I manage to realize what I'm writing wrong, what are my mistakes, and I rewrite after I listen to what I wrote. I rewrite probably the whole paragraph, then I listen again, and then if it sounds good, it's good, it's okay. After writing the whole paper, I listen to the paper again and again, and it's much easier because if you have to write something that you wrote, it's just you don't. I'm usually not motivated to do it, but listening is I'm motivated enough, and so writing does not become such a hard thing for me because I just write what I have in my mind, I listen, and then I correct. I usually use read out loud too. Uh, Now, after you wrote your paper is great. It's structured. All the paragraphs make sense. You have nice pictures, and the idea is great, and everything is amazing. Then you might want to use your paper for strategically, and you want to think, how can I increase the number of citations? If you're an academic, you are measured. Your academic success is measured by how many people cite your paper. So the more references you add to your paper will lead to more citations. So you could cite, for example, 200 papers. No one's going to complain about that. So if you cite 200 papers, the chances of your paper being cited increases. It's interesting to repeat in the abstract the keywords that you of your paper. So people in research engines look for keywords, and then they'll get your paper in front of them. And these keywords, maybe it's a good idea to talk with Conrado how to get very good keywords on your research topic in order for people to read and cite more your paper. Publishing open source increases the citations of a paper, so always try to publish open source if you can. Of course, open source is very expensive, but for example, if you publish open source in physics, the chances that your paper will be cited increases 170% to 580%. Mathematics, 35% to 91%. In our electrical engineering is 51%. So this is the closest that we get. So it increases the number of citations. So try to publish open source. Strategic citations is also very important in order to get your paper published. For example, if you're publishing in Elsevier, you should cite 50 to 90% of your citations should be from Elsevier. Why? Because Elsevier is going to look at how many citations they have. They are the ones that select the editors that are going to read your paper, and they're going to pick a nice editor that will accept your paper if you make them happy. Elsevier, if you publish in Springer, add a lot of Springer references. If you put in IEEE, put a lot of IEEE references. If you don't have any IEEE reference, they probably give your paper to an editor that usually rejects papers. And then once the paper is with an editor, what happens that is always good to cite the journal from where the editor is from. So, for example, if you want to publish in the Energy Journal, the editor from the Energy Journal will want a lot of citations from the Energy Journal. So, try to cite 5 to 20, maybe even 50, as many citations from the Energy Journal as you can, and that will make the chances of your paper increase significantly. And I'm not joking. Another thing is that once you write your paper, you've written your paper. I usually look for the authors that I have cited the most, because if I so when you submit a paper, you have to suggest several reviewers. So I usually, if I don't have anyone in mind, which is a colleague, which I know that likes my work, which I know that's doing something similar, which is not going to reject my paper, I usually pick a reviewer that I have cited 3 to 4 times. And if the journal decides to pick this reviewer because they want you to paper to be published, the chances that they will accept your paper increases because they will be very happy to have 3 or 4 more citations if they accept your paper. So this is not a rule, but overall, if you consider every publisher, every editor, every reviewer, the chances will increase that your paper will be published. So the idea is to submit as many papers as you can, have as many papers as possible being under review, major corrections, have as many papers published, submitted as possible if you're an academic. Don't worry to make a paper 100% perfect before submitting. If you're tired of working on it and you reach a point that you say, okay, I don't want to work on it anymore, it's not finalized, but submit. Don't leave it. It's always good to submit. Don't worry about them rejecting. Academic journals rejecting papers, they reject papers every day, is a common thing. And the good thing is that you get feedback from the reviewers, and then you can use the feedback in order to improve your paper. Maybe improve with major corrections, so you improve the paper and then the paper will be published afterwards. Or maybe they will reject, but they will say, no, this paper is not good because of this and that. Maybe they will say, forget about this idea because of this, and then they'll tell you the reason why you should forget, and you consider to forget the paper. Maybe you stop writing the paper, you give up on the paper, and you bin it. It's always good to have a second opinion. What I usually do also is that I leave some things undone because I don't want to spend too much time in papers. So sometimes I purposely leave some details of my methodology, of my results, of the conclusions not addressed, which are kind of obvious, but it will take me a week or two, in order to resolve, but in order for the reviewer to find the issue and suggest an improvement, because usually reviewers really like to find problems, and they feel that they contributed to the paper, and they think, and when they think that they contributed to the paper and they write something positive about your paper to improve your paper because they found, they are likely to accept your paper because they feel that they took part of the development of the paper. So if you, for example, write an amazing paper and and the reviewer does not cannot contribute with anything, he might feel very frustrated, and because of that, he might even not accept your paper because he could not find any issue. I know this sounds crazy, but this usually happens. So it's always good to leave some things undone, which the reviewer uh, can find out and suggest. But of course, don't leave something undone, which will require you to rewrite the whole paper, because then you have to run a model again. You have to rewrite the results, and that's going to change the graphics. So you're going to have to create new images, and it's going to be very difficult to change. Make sure that you leave something that is very easy to implement. So after your paper is published and accepted and everyone's happy, you can celebrate, have some drinks, go out after COVID pandemic finishes, and you should focus on sharing your paper, promoting the paper, and after cite the paper, cite your own paper. So as I mentioned before, in order to make your paper as many citations as possible, you should publish it open source. So these are the costs for open source publications. It varies from zero. Some publications are free. They have their own subscriptions. So the people that wants to read the paper will have to pay, or the people that will it's publishing pays, and these are the costs. So it could go up to £5,000, which is very expensive in order to pay. And these are the costs from the publishers. The cost of the publishers reduce if, for example, the paper is not going to be printed, if the subscription is only online, or if the paper is open access. So if they publish open access, the cost of the paper to the publisher is smaller overall. These are different publishers and their costs. So Nature, for example, is the most expensive. I have published a paper in Nature Communications, and IASA, where I work, paid £5,000. I hope they paid me for £5,000, but they paid Nature £5,000 for the paper to be published. So very expensive. Which are the different types of publication? There are closed publications, which the reader has to pay, so it's free for you. There's bronze papers, which literally, so the editor does not charge you anything, and they decide if they're going to make it freely available. They decide if they're going to ask for subscription. For example, if your paper is very good and they want to promote their journal, and they know that a lot of people will cite it, but they will only cite if it's open access. What they do is that they make open access in order to improve their rankings, because every publisher is competing with each other. Every journal is competing with each other. So they have these bronze articles, which can either they can decide if they want to make it gold, if they want to make it closed. For example, I published one paper in So the airship paper in energy conversion and management, I published, closed, and they asked, can we make it open source? And I said, of course. And then they made it open source. So these submissions are bronze journals. They decide if they want to make it open source or not. Hybrids are journals that accept either closed, so subscription papers, or gold papers. So they accept both depending if you pay or not. So these are hybrid journals. And then you have the gold. Gold is if you give money. So gold is money. You pay them, give them gold, they make it open access. So you pay the publisher, the person that's writing, the writer, the author of the paper pays in order for the paper to be open access. And the green is a new source of it's not so new, it exists for some time, but it has been increasing lately. And the idea is that the author will pick up the paper that they publish, and they will also deposit their paper in their own repository. For example, IASA has a repository called Pure. And if you want to read a paper that I wrote, you don't need to pay. You can go to Pure and it's free there. But it's not going to be the final version of the paper. It's going to be a preprint of the paper. Green papers are preprints. So if you want to increase your citation, and but people cannot read your paper, you can put your paper as preprint in another location so that people can access for free. It's not going to be the final version of the paper, but it's going to be literally the same paper without so the format of the original paper. There's Dynamon Platinum, Dynamon or Platinum, which are free for the author and for the reader, so it's free for everyone, which is the case of Cielo, which is a publisher from São Paulo, from Brazil, which is free, which is great. Black Black paper is the illegal distribution without copyright material. For example, Sci-Hub. So if you go to Sci-Hub, you can download papers there. People share their papers with you, but it's not legal. It's black paper. So the process for publishing paper. So if a paper is open access, if it's not open access, then it's a closed paper. If it is open access, then you have to look at the journal. Which journal is this? If this journal is a gold journal, then your paper will be a gold paper. If it's not a gold journal, it can be different. So it will depend on the repository. So if you put your paper in a repository, it is going to be green. The preprint, your paper is going to be a green paper. If your paper is not put in a repository, it will depend on the publisher of your paper and on the license, and it could be a bronze paper, or it could be a hybrid paper. It's a bit complicated to understand. It took me a long time to understand. I'm not gonna go spend so much time with it, but if you guys have a question, please ask me. This is explaining how the publication process works. So before you submit the paper, it's called a preprint. And you can put your preprint in a green repository. Some journals are not going to accept your submission if you already put in a green repository. Some will, so it depends. And then you submit to the paper. You have reviews. So the reviewers will review your paper. They will give corrections. You make the corrections. You have a postprint, which is not published. Some papers also accept that your postprint is deposited in a repository. in order to get green access. It's better to have a postprint than a preprint in a repository, but sometimes you have to wait 6 to 12 months in order to deposit, and this depends on the publisher that you publish in your paper. Then the paper is published. It can be gold if you pay. If it's in a hybrid journal, it can also be open access if you pay them. So, but if it's subscription journal, you cannot put in your repository the published paper because of copyright infringement. But you can put a postprint, you can put a preprint, depending on the publisher. So, what's a preprint? For example, this is the text written from one of the disciples of Jesus Christ, and then people get this preprint, and then they put in a Bible, and then they sell in a book. So this is a postprint, this is a preprint. This is an example. And the locations that you can publish your preprints are Cielo Preprint, which is great. So we have a free database in Brazil that we can publish our preprints, and people will type the title of your paper. They will see in Google the the site in Science Direct in Scopus, and they will also find the preprint version in Cielo. Sometimes they are not they won't have access to your final paper, but they can read the same preprint paper in Cielo. And there are different other ones. This AR shift is very used. HAL is from France, is very used. This is the repository from IASA, which I usually put my papers. There is a list of several other preprint repositories around the world in Wikipedia. So ResearchGate is not a location where you should put your preprint. You because if you do that, the publishers might not like, and they might ask you to remove, or they might not be very happy when you submit another paper to them. What you should do is that you publish your preprints in one of the repositories, as I mentioned, and then you add the paper to ResearchGate as a preprint from the other repository. So you have to. ResearchGate is not a repository. ResearchGate is a location to share papers which are published in other locations. So these are the different types of papers at different subjects. So we are engineering, engineering technology. Most of them are closed, so you have to pay subscription. A lot of people deposit, not a lot, but some people deposit the papers in repository, preprints depositories. Some people pay, and some journals decide to make them open source. For different publishers, you have Elsevier is the one that has the most citations, but has not so many open source publications. Different publishers have different policies. The number of publications with repositories, the author. So this only depends on the author. The author is going to deposit the paper in two locations. You submit to a journal, and then you put in a repository for people to read it for free. They are increasing the numbers because they know that the number of citations will increase. These are the institutions that pay for open access. Austria Research Fund is the one that pays the most money for publishers. And this is the why I working for IASA. IASA is an Austrian institution. I get gold access for the papers that I publish or that I participate as coordinator author, thanks to the Austrian government that has a lot of money and pays for golden subscriptions. The publisher that receives the most money for golden subscriptions is Elsevier, then Springer Nature, and the journal that receives the most money in 2020 was Nature Communications, I actually gave them $5,000 to them. And these are the policies, the policies for preprint policies. For example, Elsevier says Elsevier is generally permissive with respect to authors and electric preprints. Authors can share the preprints anywhere at any time. They encourage authors to link from their preprints to their journal publications via digital or object identifier. Authors can update their preprint on Archic or HEPREC with their accepted manuscripts. However, please note that Cell Press, Lancet, and some society-owned journals have their own preprint policies available in their informations to authors. So you should read the information to authors about preprints for each paper from Elsevier, but generally it's compatible with preprint policy. Another approach to increase the impact of your paper, for example, in Elsevier, increase the citations, is to create an audio slide. So, for example, attach a presentation to your paper. So then you publish your paper. People don't want to read the paper; they want to hear a presentation from you. Then you can create an audio slide. Only 15% of the people that read the papers or download the papers actually listen to the audio slides, but is 15%. So it's something. It's worth, for example, spending 2 hours to do it. Uh, Only 75% of Elsevier journals accept audio slides, so it's also an interesting strategy. I only published one audio slide. The reason why I didn't publish more audio slides is because I forgot about it, and because I want to, when I submit, I just want to get rid of the paper because I want to do something else. But is worth just spending some more time in order to increase the impact of the paper. So how are academics scored? So this, for example, is my Scopus. If you put in Science Direct and you click in Julian, this is what you get. We are scored. Academics are scored the number of papers that they publish, the number of citations, and the H index. So write as many papers as you can. Write interesting papers that people cite, and then your H index will increase. So this is the way researchers are scored. If you go into ResearchGate and you put a score, you will see 10 H index, and also in my case 8 H index. This 8 H index is the H index without counting my own citation. So the papers that I cited, my own papers. So they have both values. For Scopus, the one that matters really is the overall. Scopus doesn't care if you cited your own papers. So this is quite interesting. For example, if you publish 3 papers a year and half of the papers that you have is accumulated in your research career, you cite yourself cites your own papers. So every paper that you produce, you cite half of the papers that you have. It can turn out that if you publish 3 papers a year in 20 years, you have around 800 self citations. It's a bit crazy, but it's a strategy that you can also use in order to increase your citations and increase your H index. But given that it's crazy for you to cite all your papers, you should think which papers I should cite in order to potentialize my rankings. And for example, I have a 10 H index because I published 10 papers with more than 10 citations. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 papers with 10 citations, and I wanna know which of these papers should I cite in order to increase my age index to 20 in 5 years time or 4 years time. So I can, for example, estimate how many citations I have per year in these journals, and then extrapolating the number of citations that I'll have in the next years. I have these amount of citations, and these are the numbers of citations left. I need to cite, self-cite myself. I have been publishing 5 papers a year as first author. So, for example, in 4 years, I'll have 20 papers that I can cite whichever paper I want. And maybe I should focus on these ones. But then I have to look at the subjects. Of course, I'm not going to cite a paper that has nothing to do with the paper that I'm writing. So I have to look. For example, this climate change paper, I'm not very interested to cite because first, I'm not the first author. Second, I'm not really working so much in this area. For example, seawater air conditioning. I'm not going to publish 14 papers on seawater air conditioning. So this paper is not going to contribute to my H index. Solar power also, I'm not going to publish 15 solar power papers because I don't like so much solar power. So not going to contribute to my H index, but pump storage, yes. Pump storage, yes. Hydropower, yes. Water energy and land nexus, yes. Geoengineering, maybe, given that the number is so small, maybe I will cite it. So you have to also help yourself, right? You want to be an academic, you want to make sure that you help yourself in order to increase your H index. Other forms in order to improve your citations is publishing very high impact factor. These are the very high impact factor papers. These are the highest impact factor papers in the world. These are the ones that could be relevant for engineers. In Brazil, we have Qualiscapes. Uh, Promec is in engineering 3, so we have to publish papers in Engenharias 3. These are the A1 papers involving energy that you have that you should publish. So you should focus to publish papers in these ones. If they reject, so you can also submit to A2 papers. So these ones, it's very few papers, sorry, very few journals that you have available to cite, but this is restricted to energy title. So there are a few more relevant ones. And in conclusion, we have the academics are scored with the number and quality of the papers. Have a list of different papers and research topics to increase your productivity, academic productivity. The topic of your article should be a hotspot to receive many citations. Cite the publisher, the donor, the reviewers in order to increase the chances that your paper will be published. Use self-citation to your advantage. Always try to increase the impact factor of your papers and submit, submit, submit. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Julian. It was very nice.
Welcome, Natalia. So if you guys have no questions, I have, yeah,
Thank you, Julian. I have a question.
yeah.
What's the difference if I publish in a journal other than Engenharias 3?
Sorry.
What's the difference if I publish in a journal other than Engenharias 3?
Yeah. So copies will use will use these Qualiscapes grades in order to estimate what's the impact of your research in your field. So, for example, if you want to apply for um, produtibilidade de pesquisa, So if you want to be ranked researcher number A1, 1A, 12, B1, C, it will depend on how many papers you have published given that you are a researcher in PROMEC, they will rank your research publications in Engenharia 3. So, for example, if you publish a paper that is not counted for Engenharia 3, CAPES is not going to count that paper as a paper for your research productivity. This also applies, for example, if you're going to apply for a concurso público, for example, for professor, each program will have their own regulations. For example, PROMEC might say that if you want to be a professor at PROMEC, your rank, your final score will vary with the amount of A1, A2 publications you have. So these publications will contribute to your points. And they will restrict to, for example, engineering 3, engineering 2. Maybe they won't have this restriction. Maybe they will say it doesn't matter which paper, which journal. Maybe they will say the impact factor is most important. But I have participated in some concurso público, and most of them focus on the score of Engenharia 3, for example, Engenharia 1, Engenharia 2.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Right, so I have received the final submission from these people: Renan, Lara, Augusto, Roque, Conrado, Marcos. I have received the first submission from Flavio Frederick, and so if you don't submit, again, I will consider the first submission, but please submit today. Today is the last day for submission for your research proposals. I'll send you an email reminding. And thank you so much. Any more questions? Guess not.
Thank you, Julian. It was very interesting, the class today.
Okay. Thank you, Lara. I'm happy that I helped you guys. Good luck and nice papers.
Thank you.
Bye, Julian. Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tchau, boa noite.